There has been a lot that's happened over the past 5 weeks or so since we've done an episode, so I thought it was more than time. We're well into the new year. Happy 2026. I thought it was well beyond time to have a little discussion here about the St. Louis Cardinals, what they've done over the past 5 weeks. We'll talk about Wilson Contreras being traded, Nolan Arenado being traded, some other moves that they've made. We are going to talk about Brendan Donovan and the latest news that surrounds him, and we're going to make a case for keeping him. We're going to make a case for trading him, and then we're going to look at the prospect rankings to see what the fruit of Kyle Bloom's work has been, where the Cardinals stack in terms of the prospect rankings according to multiple sources, including Keith Law. And then just for funsies, we are going to look at the projected starting lineup for 2026 and try to determine how good the St. Louis Cardinals can be. All of that, well, I guess I said it all of that on this episode of the Believe in St. Louis Cardinals podcast. Welcome to the Believe in St. Louis Cardinals podcast. My name is Seth Dewald. You can follow me on X or Twitter at Seth_DIEWOLD, where occasionally I rant about the St. Louis Cardinals. I'm a passionate St. Louis Cardinals fan. I have been my entire life. So this podcast comes at you from that angle. So if that's something that you like, click the like button, subscribe to the YouTube channel that I'm going to be posting videos to weekly, maybe not weekly during the off season, but semi-regularly during the off season. And then once we hit the regular season, that is when the videos will start to be cranked up a little bit more. We had a podcast that I did with a friend that's kind of fizzled out, Long Live Baseball. So it will be on that YouTube channel for now until I can figure out what the name of the YouTube channel, my personal YouTube channel, is going to be. But the podcast feed is Believe in St. Louis Cardinals on the Believe Network. So go subscribe there or follow the podcast over there. So with the housekeeping out of the way, again, thank you for listening. Let's talk about what the Cardinals have been up to since we last recorded about 5 weeks ago, as we said in the open. Nolan Arenado, Wilson Contreras have been traded away, and what they got in return for Wilson Contreras, which was the first trade that they made on December 22nd, Hunter Dobbins, Yoiker Fajardo, and Blake Aida to the St. Louis Cardinals for Wilson Contreras, which by most pundits was about the return that they thought they could get for a player like Wilson Contreras. So it's not crazy, it's definitely not unexpected. At least it wasn't to me, that Wilson Contreras gets traded 3 days before Christmas. And ultimately, this is the direction that the Cardinals want to go. And I fully support it, to be honest. And we're going to talk about this when we talk about Brendan Donovan here in a little bit. This is so refreshing because Kyle Bloom had a mess to clean up that John Mozeliak left him, because he was trying to push the chips in once again, year after year after year, signing Lance Lynn, Kyle Gibson, putting a Band-Aid over a cannonball wound. Let's just say that. And it didn't work. The Cardinals were not winning with Wilson Contreras. They were not winning with Nolan Arenado. They weren't winning with Sonny Gray. So the fact that you can trade these guys, and I get it, they didn't get much for Nolan Arenado, who was traded on January 13th to the Arizona Diamondbacks for Jack Martinez. They cover a large portion of his salary for next year. But this year is all about clearing the decks. I don't think anybody really expects the Cardinals to be competitive in 2026. So for that reason, all of these moves make sense, and they're not surprising in the least bit. And it's a direction that you can pick when you're running a franchise. The worst place that you can be. I mean, just ask the Steelers, the Pittsburgh Steelers, who just parted ways with a coach that has been there for the past 19 years in Mike Tomlin, and has never had a losing season. At least I don't think so. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But the worst place to be in professional sports is somewhere in the middle, and that's where the Cardinals were with these players. So now, if you want to call it tanking, I don't know if that's the right word. I think rebuilding is a better word to use, because yes, in essence, you are trying to tank, but in Major League Baseball, since they had the lottery, there's not as much incentive to tank as there is in the NFL. And especially considering, in baseball, not one position dominates the sport like the quarterback position does in football. So there's not really as big of a motivation to tank. But in essence, that's the Cardinals are choosing to go through this painful process because they understand on the other side of it, is where they want to be. They want to build up this prospect base that has been dismal for a while, and they want to build up their farm system, which is what Kyle Bloom has been doing over the past few years. And I think it's the right direction to go in, and it's going to be painful temporarily, but I do think that it is the right way to go. And other moves, other minor moves the Cardinals have made in over the last month or so. Justin Brule from the Guardians for cash considerations, the left-handed pitcher, and Ryan Stanek. Now, if you look at their stats, you just print out a sheet of paper that has their win-loss record. It's not great. Like in the case of Justin Brule, who pitched for Toronto last year, 5.27 ERA in 13 2/3 innings pitched. Not great. FIP 416, a little bit lower. WHIP almost 2, which is not good at all. So clearly Kyle Bloom sees something in these guys other than what's printed out on the stat sheet. Ryan Stanek, big guy, 6'4", 226, but not really that, hasn't been really that great over the past couple of seasons for the New York Mets. Last season, posting an ERA of over 5.30 in 56 innings pitched. So he did pitch a lot of innings, but was not very effective in those innings. And it's interesting. I also think that there's an element of this too, when you get these guys on these 1-year deals or these short-term deals. And this is something the Brewers do that I don't understand why the Cardinals and other organizations don't take advantage of these types of contracts. If you can get a veteran, I think the ultimate example of this is Dustin May. Getting him on a 1-year deal, maybe the contract of $12 million looks a little bit steep, but if he goes out and pitches really well, we know Dustin May has a pedigree as a prospect. We know he had a lot of upside when he was with Los Angeles. Now injuries have kind of derailed his career just a little bit, and now he's with the Cardinals. But if he goes out and pitches well for the St. Louis Cardinals, the Cardinals are going to be able to trade him at the deadline for a decent prize. And all it costed you was $12 million, right? I say all it cost you was $12 million, but heck, like getting these prospects and getting these potential future superstars and accumulating as many of them as possible is the strategy. It's that simple right now. And if you can go out and sign a Dustin May, and who knows, if he pitches well and the Cardinals feel like, they made moves to help them compete in 2027, 2028. And we'll talk about this when we talk about Brendan Donovan here in a little bit. If they feel like Dustin May can help them win in 2027 and 2028, then maybe they extend him. Maybe they're willing to spend a little bit of money, because the difference between the St. Louis Cardinals and the Tampa Bay Rays, which is where Kyle Bloom came from, and I know he was with the Boston Red Sox as well, the Cardinals could put a decent payroll together. 160, 170 million, upwards of that is where they've historically been, which historically has put them in the top 12, top 15 payrolls. They're not going to be near the bottom of the league. So Kyle Bloom is going to have some money to work with. Now he's going to have to be careful about who he chooses to pay, and that's a mistake that John Mozeliak made time and time again, bringing in the likes of Brett Cecil and others, Dexter Fowler, etc. We could go on down the line, extending Matt Carpenter. So he's going to have to be careful with who he chooses to extend. But this is a feeling out process as well. So you have it. It really just gives you a lot of options, which is really smart. So bringing in these relievers, these pitchers, if they pitch well in the bullpen and they're going to get opportunities, then the Cardinals could potentially flip them at the trade deadline and get something in return for their services. And I think that's really, really smart. And I think that's one advantage that, if you have a lot of roster space available, which the Cardinals have freed up that roster space by trading Nolan Arenado and Wilson Contreras and Sonny Gray. If you have that roster space available, you can utilize it to kind of sign some of these retreads. And if they pitch well for you, it's kind of all upside, very little risk aside from the money that you'd be losing out on. But I would consider that a decent investment, or a really good investment for what it's going to cost you. So all of these moves that the Cardinals make, and I think good organizations do this, all of the moves that they've made have been in a cohesive lane. Like, it's all together. We know what the strategy is. It's easy to communicate that to the fans. Well, it isn't easy for all of them to understand that message, and it's hard for them to accept that message, but it's easy for, the common fan to kind of see what the Cardinals are doing, right? It's easy for them to look at the transactions on a piece of paper and go, okay, the Cardinals are rebuilding. They're building this with an eye towards the future. And ideally, when you're really rocking and rolling like the Cardinals were doing in the mid 2000s, late like in 2010, 2011, when they were very successful, but really in the mid 2000s, they had a really good prospect base. When organizations, and this is not just in baseball, but any organization, they are at their peak when they have superstar players and they have a farm system, or they are able to either draft, recruit, sign young players that can also contribute on lower contracts, or have those players available in the case of baseball in the farm system, so that they can trade those players away for players that they would need later on. Now, the ultimate example of this is the Los Angeles Dodgers, but it's not really a fair example because they have all the money to spend in the world in every facet of the organization. Payroll, especially, they just don't like, they're willing to exceed that more than any other team in really the history of baseball. So it's not really fair to look at the Dodgers and go, okay, that's replicable, right? But for the Cardinals, I don't know if they're small market. They're definitely like somewhere in a mid market. I think that they can get to a point where they can develop their own superstar players, retain some of them, not all of them, but also be churning out pitching and being able to replace the star players that they have to trade away in order to maintain and sustain a winner long term, which is what they did throughout the 2000s through 2011 and through a lot of the mid 2010s. So that is the obvious goal, and that's what they're doing. And we need to ask ourselves now, and this is the main segment of the video, is where does Brendan Donovan fit into all that? Because if we just look at Brendan Donovan on the surface, right, he's a 28-year-old player who's played pretty well over the last several years. He's definitely been the best hit. I mean, I would say maybe not the best hitter, but definitely the most steady force of offense for the Cardinals for the last couple of years. In 2025, for example, 10 home runs, 50 RBIs, only played in 118 games, but was able to consistently put together good at bats. Hit 287. He has a career 282 average in the big leagues, which by today's standards is extremely good. His OPS career 772, OPS plus 117. So those are statistics that you can really get behind. And he was an all-star in 2025. The issue is what is going to be the cost associated with Brendan Donovan. And I must apologize. He actually just turned 29 on January 16th. So he is 29 years old. And we really just have to ask ourselves, like, what is the price tag going to be for Brendan Donovan long-term, and how does he fit into the long-term plans? Because if the Cardinals are not going to win until 2027, 2028 at the earliest, I would say at the earliest 2027, because I don't think anybody thinks they're going to win this year. That would put Brendan Donovan in the last year of his deal, in the last year of arbitration, and that would put him at 30 years old entering the season. Now, I'm not here to say that Brendan Donovan can't be an outlier, because I think he can be, but typically production dips once you hit 30 years old. I don't think that it's, I don't think too many people would disagree with me when I say that. We've seen production dip. Even the great Albert Pujols, once he got into his early 30s, mid 30s, we saw the production start to dip once he was with the Los Angeles Angels. So if the extension, if we're going to make a case for a Brendan Donovan extension, then we need to ask ourselves, what does that price tag look like? So Sports Illustrated came out with an interesting article. Kurt Bishop published on January 15, 2026, extend or trade, breaking down the two outcomes for Brendan Donovan, right? So the first outcome, or I should say the second outcome that he talked about was extending him. And he said, well, trading him makes the most sense, and I agree with him, and we'll talk about that case here in a second. There's also a case to give him a contract extension, and the Cardinals haven't drafted and developed a player of Donovan's caliber since the days of Albert Pujols and Yadier Molina. Now, he does go on to say that Donovan isn't a surefire Hall of Famer, but there's something to be said for a player that comes through the organization and turns into a star. And my issue with this would be I don't know if Brendan Donovan's a quote unquote star for the St. Louis Cardinals. I think he's definitely their best player. I think a lot of people really like him, and that's good. I think he's a good leader in the clubhouse. I think that comes from multiple good sources. And I'm just not sure how a player like Brendan Donovan ages. And if we're talking about an extension that is $20 million plus per year, maybe. I mean, perhaps that is something that we could that you could stomach as an organization. But if we get up to the $25-30 million for per year for a Brendan Donovan, that's really expensive. Now, a lot of projections out there would say around the $20-ish million per year, or AAV. So, to be fair, it looks like a fair market value for Brendan Donovan would be around 20-ish million per year. And if that's the number, I think the Cardinals could afford it, especially considering, they're trading away a bunch of players that are making a lot of money. They're giving up money to get those players off the books now, which in essence could free up a player like Brendan Donovan to be extended. But you have to ask yourself, okay, are you going to be competitive in 2027, 2028, 2029? When is that day going to be? And by that time, is Brendan Donovan going to be a really good to borderline elite player? I don't know that he is an elite player that you would want to pay, let's say, $25 million per year to. I definitely don't think that. I think somewhere closer to 20 is where I would be comfortable. So the case for keeping him would be, you're going to have the money. You want to be competitive sooner rather than later. Brendan Donovan's clearly your best player that you developed in-house. That's the case for keeping him. And you want to sell to the fans, like you want to bring in a free agent here or there in 2027 and maybe put yourself maybe not at the top of the division, but maybe you could sneak into a wild card spot in 2027 potentially. Maybe you could sell that to the fan base. Maybe you just want to keep a homegrown star. I mean, there are several reasons that you might want to keep Brendan Donovan. Now, the reasons to trade him would be he's your most valuable asset on the team that you could trade. And the returns that I've seen out there, I mean, whether they be from the Seattle Mariners or the San Francisco Giants, those returns could be massive. And that's exactly what Chaim Bloom said, according to Katie Wu on Twitter, that the Cardinals, this is their official position, is they're not looking to trade Brendan Donovan actively. But they're keeping the option open, and they would only accept a massive haul or an offer that blows them away, I think was the exact quote. So if that's the approach, I'm more on board with it. And it's not like you have to rush out and do this right away. I mean, Brendan Donovan is under contract for another season of arbitration. So the Cardinals don't have to rush out and do anything right now. Although if you made me pick a lane, going back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the episode with Nolan Arenado, Wilson Contreras, Sonny Gray, the Cardinals signing these players like Dustin May to short-term deals, everything the Cardinals have done up to this point makes me believe that trading Brendan Donovan is the better course of action, because I'm not convinced the Cardinals are going to be competitive in 2027. I'm not really convinced that they're going to be competitive in 2028. I mean, it's going to take a while for some of these prospects to get up to the system, for the pitching staff to really start to take hold. I mean, maybe Matthew Liberatore's your ace of the future. Maybe he isn't. There are a lot more questions that we need to answer if we're going to try to put together some reasonable expectations of 2-3 years from now. So if you're going to make me choose, like, Are we going to sign? Are the St. Louis Cardinals going to extend Brendan Donovan, or should they? The answer is probably no. The answer is probably, yeah, we should probably trade him and get a big haul for him. Now, it's obviously not the end of the world if they decide to retain him and resign him to a deal worth up to 20 million plus per year. That's a lot of money. The Cardinals could certainly afford it, and it definitely would help. Let's just not ignore this fact that the Cardinals are going to have to, sell some tickets this year. So having Brendan Donovan on the roster helps out a little bit, although it didn't really help out much last year, but that's beside the point. The point is you do need some good players still on your team, right? And Brendan Donovan's still a good player that would attract some fans. I'm sure some fans out there have a Brendan Donovan jersey, but in my opinion, what makes the most sense for the Cardinals, or this iteration of the Cardinals, is to keep down the lane that you've been going down, right? Keep on piling up those prospects, keep building the foundation. And at the end of the day, once you have the foundation built, you can start piecing together what you miss out on once these players start to get to the major leagues and are developed, whether they be Liam Doyle or JJ Weatherholt, whatever the case may be. So let's transition off of that and let me know what you think in the comments. Leave a review. A 5-star review would be much appreciated on Apple Podcast. Now that we've talked about the Brendan Donovan situation and hashed it out, I think it makes the most sense to trade him. Although the approach of, well, we're not actively trading him, we're just trying to see what we can get for him, and we're going to have to be blown away by a trade offer. I think that's a good approach to take, because I do think it creates leverage and builds up, the idea in other teams' mind, like, oh, we're going to have to really come to the table with a good offer. The Cardinals, I mean, the evaluation of their farm system has kind of been all over the place. I mean, according to Fangraphs, they have the number 2 overall farm system. I really respect Fangraphs. I think that they do a remarkable job. So I would, I would trust them really well. But, Keith Law, and I counted this earlier, and let me just double check. I think he came out with his top 100 prospects, and he published this early in the morning, 4:45 a.m. Central Time, and I was counting. And the Cardinals, they have JJ Weatherholt he has JJ Weatherholt at number 7. He has scrolling. This is great radio. He has Liam Doyle at 26. He has Rainiel Rodriguez, the catching prospect, 19 years old, at 29. And unless I miss something, that is it for the number of Cardinals prospects that are in the top 100, according to him. Now, those are good prospects to have, certainly, but it's kind of all over the place. I mean, I think it was Baseball America that put out the Cardinals have 5 players or prospects in the top 100. I think MLB.com has 4 Cardinals players in the top 100. So it's all over the place. And honestly, we're not really going to know the results of how good these prospects are going to be until 3 or 4 years from now, 2 or 3 years from now at the earliest, probably. So as frustrating as it seems, or as it is, it's going to take some time. It's not going to happen right away, and according to, just to give you the opposite end of the spectrum, USA Today came out with their recent power rankings on January 22nd. And I don't know this individual, John Hofling from USA Today, and he ranked the Cardinals at number 20 overall, the number 20 overall farm system. So all from number 2 on Fangraphs to number 20 on USA Today. Now, I lean toward Fangraphs personally, but I mean, what I think that illustrates is nobody really knows, like, I don't know. The experts, I mean, they have mixed opinions. The Cardinals, I think what maybe some people could agree on is the Cardinals do have some prospects that other teams would like a JJ Weatherholt, Liam Doyle. Those are some really exciting players that, I think the Cardinals could potentially build around in 2026, 2027, 2028 and beyond. So just for fun, let's now take a look at the potential starting lineup for the St. Louis Cardinals. And this is put out by Fangraphs, so I did not have anything to do with putting this together. So do not blame me if you disagree with it. But the starting lineup, assuming the Cardinals keep Brendan Donovan, is Brendan Donovan leading off, playing second base, Ivan Herrera DHing, Alec Burleson playing first base, Lars Nootbaar hitting fourth, playing left field, Mason Wynn hitting fifth is interesting, playing shortstop, Nolan Gorman hitting sixth, playing third base, Jordan Walker in right field, Pedro Pajes catching, and Victor Scott in center field. Now, this does not have JJ Weatherholt up with the Major League Club. Instead, we have Thomas DeJacy, Jose Fermin, Yohel Pozo, and Nathan Church all on the bench. I would assume that we are going to see JJ Weatherholt, if not at the very beginning of the season. I would say at the very latest by midsummer. I really think that unless they don't think he's ready for the majors, which, I mean, who knows, I guess, but from all accounts that I've seen, he is a very impressive prospect, and I would assume that he would be up sooner rather than later. Now, the starting pitching rotation, again, according to Fangraphs, Matthew Liberatore, Dustin May, Andre Palante, Michael McGreevy, Kyle Leahy, and in the bullpen, we have Riley O'Brien and Jojo Romero as suited to be closers, Matt Swanson, Ryan Stanek, Ryan Hernandez, Justin Brule, Matt Pashard, Gordon Graceffo, all as middle relievers or setup men. So again, we're probably looking, and I think the win total for the Cardinals is in the low. I think I saw 71.5 was the early posting. And again, this is January, so that number can move a little bit. But yeah, I think it's about right. I think this iteration of the Cardinals in 2026 hopefully is as low as they go. At least that's the hope, right? Because once we get some of these prospects in the system, start developing them, start getting them up through the ranks, hopefully they can come in and start making an impact. And I'm talking about the JJ Weatherholts of the world, the Liam Doyles of the world, possibly some of the other guys as well. But I mean, maybe I don't know if Blaze Jordan is going to make much of a difference, to be honest. But you never know. You just never know. Maybe a Jesus Baez comes up sooner rather than later. I mean, maybe not this year. You just never know. I mean, those are some guys with some real upside, and some guys that you can really get excited about. And I think what's exciting going forward is that the Cardinals, they do have a legitimate direction. They are picking a lane. They're not just staying in the middle. They're not just trying to put a Band-Aid over a cannonball wound that is the starting pitching rotation. Now, are they going to struggle in 2026? Absolutely. But I am encouraged by the fact that Chaim Bloom is picking this direction, and he is telling us this needs to be done. If we're going to do this job, we need to do it the right way. And I'm on board for it. I'm going to be watching Cardinals baseball this year. I'll be going to some games. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Again, subscribe on the YouTube channel. Give us a 5-star review on the podcast feed. It means a lot to me, and it means a lot to the show as well. We want to keep bringing you this content. And also, let us know what you would like to see more of as well in the comments, and we'll maybe tailor some episodes around some of those ideas if we get enough of a desire to see that kind of content. So anyway, thank you so much for watching. Be good, everyone, and we will see you later. And until next time, let's go Redbirds. Cannot wait for spring training. Cannot wait for opening day, even though this isn't the best Cardinals team we've ever seen. So until next time, be good, everyone, and we will see you later.